Puma Punku is one of the most mysterious archaeological sites in the world, and for many researchers it is the most important piece of evidence in the entire ancient astronaut and ancient technology puzzle. For decades, archaeologists have argued about how the huge stones at Puma Punku were shaped, moved, and placed with such impossible precision. Some have suggested that the stones were carved by hand. Others have wondered whether they were shaped by gods, unknown technology, or something that no longer exists. Even today, experts are still confused about what Puma Punku really was, what it looked like when it was complete, and why people long ago built such a massive and complicated structure in the high mountains of Bolivia. Recently, thanks to advanced 3D scanning and microscopic study of the stones, researchers have discovered new details that were hidden for centuries. These discoveries are now forcing experts to question almost everything they thought they knew about the site. One of the biggest problems is that we still cannot date the stones themselves. We only have dates from soil and organic material found around the site, which may not tell the full truth. It is possible that the stones are thousands of years older than we think. Some researchers even believe they could be hundreds of thousands of years old. We simply do not know. If this turns out to be true, then the people who lived in the Andes long ago may have known something strange and amazing, such as how to make stone float, soften, or change its shape. This seems unbelievable, but the ruins themselves raise questions that cannot be easily explained. Puma Punku sits nearly 13,000 feet above sea level, on a cold and windswept plateau called the Altiplano. Here, huge stone blocks, some weighing more than 100 tons, fit together with joints so precise that the gaps between them measure less than a single millimeter. Even after 1,500 years of harsh weather, freezing temperatures, earthquakes, and erosion, the stones still show smooth edges and precise corners. Local stories say that the seams are so perfect that not even a razor blade could slide between the stones. This sounds like a legend, but people who visit the site often say it is true. Even more mysterious is the fact that what we see today is only a small piece of the original structure. Most of Puma Punku was destroyed in the 1800s when railroad workers used dynamite to break apart the stones so they could use them as building material for train tracks and bridges. Eyewitnesses from that time described the destruction. Men with hammers pried apart stones that had survived thousands of years. Carved surfaces were smashed just so they could be carried away easily. Entire sections of the original complex were torn apart and scattered across the landscape. After millions of years of natural weathering, it took only a few decades of human activity to cause massive damage. Many stones were left flipped upside down, cracked, or half buried in the earth. Because of this destruction, archaeologists today have a difficult time figuring out exactly how the original complex was arranged. Despite all of this damage, the remaining stones still show incredible precision. The famous H-shaped blocks, made from hard volcanic andesite, have clean right angles, perfectly spaced slots, and narrow grooves that look like they were cut with modern machines. These details shock engineers because the Tiwanaku culture, which is believed to have built the site, did not have iron tools, steel chisels, or any equipment that could easily shape hard stone. This contradiction has led some people to question whether the blocks were really carved at all, or whether something more unusual happened. Local Aymara stories tell of a time when the stones were soft like clay and could be shaped by hand. Some legends even say the stones flowed like water before hardening into their final form. To many, this is only a story. To others, it may be a memory of a lost technique or ancient science that allowed builders to work with stone in a way we no longer understand. Modern engineers who study Puma Punku say that the structure is far more than a pile of giant rocks. The blocks show evidence of an organized and advanced design system. The famous H-shaped stones were not randomly carved. They were created according to a standard template. Each one has identical shapes, notches, and grooves, like pieces of a giant stone puzzle. When they were placed together, they locked into position and distributed weight across the entire structure, helping it survive earthquakes and seasonal floods. Underneath the visible stones, researchers found even larger foundation blocks made of red sandstone. Some of these foundation stones weigh over 100 tons. They were placed in narrow trenches and connected through tongue and groove joints, which locked them together like gears. This system allowed the whole structure to remain stable even during powerful shaking. The builders clearly understood the forces of nature and designed a structure that was both strong and flexible. Another surprising detail is the use of metal clamps. Archaeologists have found channels cut between blocks where bronze staples were once used to connect stones. These clamps were cast on site by pouring molten metal into carved sockets. Tiny traces of arsenic inside the clamps show that the builders were skilled in metallurgy and knew how to make alloys stronger and more resistant to corrosion. This combination of dense stone, heavy foundations, interlocking geometry, and metal clamps created a structure that could survive almost anything. For more than 100 years, researchers tried to imagine what Puma Punku originally looked like, but because the stones were scattered everywhere, no one could reconstruct the site with confidence. That changed when digital archaeology arrived. Using drones, laser scanners, and very accurate cameras, teams mapped every block and created high-resolution 3D models. In 2018, a team from the University of California, Berkeley, used these scans to make small 3D printed models of the stones. When they tried connecting the models, the pieces fit together almost perfectly. Their experiments showed that the builders used a consistent design system and worked from a planned blueprint. Later projects used even more advanced scans. By 2024, teams had created a digital twin of Puma Punku, a full virtual version that showed every block in precise detail. When researchers ran computer simulations, the digital stones fell into place under virtual gravity, forming stable structures exactly as they would have stood long ago. Machine learning software studied the models and found repeating patterns and ratios, proving that the layout was not random but based on careful mathematical planning. These digital reconstructions changed the way people understand the site. They showed that Puma Punku was built with a level of precision that can be measured and confirmed scientifically. They also showed that the builders followed a shared set of guidelines and proportions, which allowed the structure to look symmetrical and balanced. The site was not just artistic, it was engineered to perfection. With every new scan and simulation, the ancient design becomes clearer, revealing how the builders balanced beauty, strength, and function. Another major mystery comes from recent laboratory studies of the stones. For many years, archaeologists assumed the stones were carved from solid rock. But chemical tests have revealed unusual features that suggest something very different. Researchers discovered that the sandstone blocks contain traces of natron, a mineral used by ancient Egyptians to make plasters and harden materials. Natron is not naturally found in this region. Some scientists believe this means the builders used a chemical process known as geopolymerization, which can turn sand and volcanic ash into a soft, moldable material that hardens into stone. Microscopic analysis shows glassy binding material inside the sandstone blocks. These glassy areas are not found in naturally formed stone and appear only when particles are fused by a chemical reaction. In experiments, when modern researchers mixed local sand, volcanic ash, water, and natron, they created an artificial stone that looked and behaved exactly like Puma Punku sandstone. Under X-ray testing, the artificial stone matched the real blocks almost perfectly. If this theory is correct, then the builders of Puma Punku had a form of ancient concrete more than 1,000 years before modern engineers rediscovered it. They might have known how to dissolve stone, mix it with other materials, and pour it into molds. This would explain the perfect angles, the sharp edges, and the smooth surfaces that seem almost impossible to carve by hand. But the most surprising discovery came in 2019, when researchers studied the andesite H blocks using advanced scanning equipment. Inside the volcanic stone, they detected tiny traces of nitrogen and carbon, chemical elements normally destroyed by the high heat of volcanic formation. Their presence suggests something organic was mixed into the material before it hardened. This supports the idea that the H blocks may also have been cast using a mixture of volcanic material, water, and organic ingredients like plant extracts or oils. If true, the stones might not have been carved at all. They may have been shaped when they were soft and then hardened into their current form. These discoveries have opened a new chapter in the study of Puma Punku. They show that the builders were not only architects and masons but also scientists and engineers. They understood materials, chemistry, weight distribution, and earthquake resistance at a level far beyond what was expected for their time. Whether their knowledge came from experimentation, lost traditions, or something else entirely remains unknown. But what is clear is that Puma Punku was not the work of simple tools or ordinary techniques. It was created through a combination of creativity, intelligence, and skill that still challenges experts today. The stones of Puma Punku continue to guard their secrets, but with modern technology, researchers are slowly beginning to understand the genius behind this ancient marvel. The idea that ancient people may have created synthetic stone instead of carving it may seem extreme at first, but it is supported by decades of research from Dr. Joseph Davidovits, the founder of the Geopolymer Institute in France. His work has changed the way many researchers think about ancient construction techniques. For years, he and his team have experimented with different mixtures using local clay, volcanic ash, and organic acids taken from plants. In their laboratory tests, they tried to recreate stone that looked and behaved exactly like the andesite blocks used at Puma Punku. The results surprised even the researchers. The stones they produced had almost the same microscopic structure as the original andesite found at the site. When they compared them side by side under a microscope, the modern samples and the ancient samples looked almost like twins. They had the same fine texture, the same small pits on the surface, and the same consistent grain size. Even the compressive strength, which measures how much force a stone can handle before breaking, was nearly identical. These results strongly suggest that the builders may have used some kind of casting or stone forming technique that is no longer known today. Skeptics argue that the similarities between the ancient stones and the recreated ones might not prove anything. They suggest that the organic traces found in the ancient andesite may have come from contamination, perhaps from plants, soil, or microorganisms entering the surface over hundreds or thousands of years. They also say that the natron found in some samples could have come from natural leaching through the soil, not from ancient construction techniques. But with every new test, these explanations become less convincing. None of the natural andesite found in the nearby quarries contains these unusual chemical features. The particular ratios of sodium, calcium, and carbon found in the ancient blocks repeat across multiple stones, which is difficult to explain as simple contamination. When the same unusual chemical signatures appear in stone that were supposedly carved from natural bedrock, researchers have to consider the possibility that something else happened. The idea that the stones were made from a mixture poured into molds is no longer easy to dismiss. If this casting idea turns out to be true, it could completely change what we thought we knew about ancient engineering in the Andes. It would mean that long before steel tools, power equipment, or industrial furnaces existed, the people of Tiwanaku understood materials at a level modern engineers did not rediscover until recently. They may have mastered a kind of ancient chemistry, creating artificial stone that allowed them to form complex shapes that would have been almost impossible to carve by hand. Some blocks at Puma Punku have sharp right angles, millimeter-perfect lines, and interior corners that even modern diamond tools struggle to cut. If those stones were cast rather than carved, then their perfect shapes make more sense. Whatever method the ancient builders used, whether carving or casting, the extraordinary precision of Puma Punku now tells a story of human intelligence and creativity that is far beyond the simple image of prehistoric people with stone hammers. It becomes a story about engineers who were so advanced that their work appears almost miraculous today. As scientific tests continue, the stones may soon prove that the people who built Puma Punku did not just move mountains. They may have actually learned how to create them. Even with all these new discoveries, the mystery of Puma Punku is far from solved. In fact, the new information has made the mystery even sharper. The more evidence researchers uncover, the more disagreements appear within the scientific community. Some experts believe the stones must have been cast. Others say that no matter how perfect the stones look, ancient people could still have carved them with enough time and patience. Because of these disagreements, archaeologists created a tiered testing system to evaluate the cast stone hypothesis. This system helps separate weak evidence from strong evidence. The first level of evidence is visual. This is what anyone can observe just by looking at the stones. The razor-thin joints between blocks, the smooth surfaces that look polished, and the absence of visible tool marks all make people wonder how such perfection was achieved with simple tools. However, these visual clues alone cannot prove that the stones were cast. They simply raise questions about the techniques used by the builders. The second level is chemical and microscopic evidence. This type of study relies on high-powered microscopes, spectroscopy, and advanced chemical analysis to identify things that the human eye cannot see. Scientists look for unusual chemical elements inside the stone, such as sodium-rich binders, glass-like phases, or traces of organic compounds that would not normally appear in natural andesite. When they find tiny pockets of material that look melted or fused, or when they find microscopic structures that match artificial stone, the case for casting becomes stronger. Each test adds another piece to the puzzle, and every microscopic scan provides more details about how the stones were actually formed. The third and most important level is replication. In science, a theory is not accepted until it can be reproduced by independent researchers under controlled conditions. That is the true test. For this reason, in 2025 a huge blind multi-laboratory experiment was launched. Multiple scientific teams from different countries were given stone samples without knowing which were from Puma Punku and which were artificially created in the lab. They were instructed to analyze the samples using the most advanced techniques available. This blind testing removes bias and ensures that no lab knows what result is expected. If all of the labs detect the same organic compounds, if they all find the same natron signatures, and if the radiocarbon dates in the organic traces match Puma Punku's construction period between AD 500 and 600, then the casting hypothesis would survive one of the strongest scientific tests in history. It would mean the builders of Tiwanaku were creating synthetic stone at a scale and level of sophistication never before documented anywhere in the ancient world. The scientific debate is intense. Skeptics say that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and they warn that environmental factors could still explain the organic materials found in the stone. They argue that soil chemistry, water flow, or even microorganisms might have introduced chemicals into the stone after it was built. On the other side, supporters of the casting theory argue that there is already enough evidence to take the idea seriously. They point to chemical residues, digital reconstructions, scanning electron microscope images, and even historical legends that speak of stone being softened or shaped like clay. They believe the growing body of data suggests ancient Andean engineers may have mastered material science centuries before modern industry. While the final scientific results are still waiting for peer review, one thing is already clear. Puma Punku has forced scientists to rethink long-held beliefs about ancient cultures. It is no longer seen as just a pile of old stones. It has become a place where old assumptions collide with new technology. Researchers now see it as a testing ground where modern methods can challenge traditional ideas. It shows that we should not underestimate the intelligence of ancient people or assume they were limited by the tools we think they had. The stones of Puma Punku show features that are difficult to explain with Bronze Age technology. The precision, the symmetry, the advanced geometry, and the almost machine-like accuracy of some blocks do not fit comfortably with what we are taught about prehistoric construction. Some people insist that advanced technology could not have existed 2,000 years ago. But if the casting hypothesis proves true, then high technology did exist, at least in the form of material science and engineering knowledge. It would not mean that the ancient builders had machines or electronics. It would simply mean they understood natural materials in a way that modern people are only now rediscovering. They might have used plant extracts, volcanic powders, alkaline minerals, and water to manipulate stone the same way modern engineers use chemicals to make concrete. Regardless of which theory turns out to be correct, the stones of Puma Punku have already achieved something remarkable. They have made people around the world look again, question again, and wonder again. They remind us that the story of human history is not fully written, and many chapters are still hidden beneath the ground, waiting to be discovered. The builders of Tiwanaku did not just create a structure. They created a mystery that challenges every generation that studies it. Every perfectly fitting joint, every block that connects with impossible precision, and every stone that looks as if it were poured into place reminds us that ancient genius should never be underestimated. Some people imagine that the past was simple and primitive, but Puma Punku proves that this belief may be wrong. The more we learn about the site, the more we realize that our ancestors might have known techniques, formulas, or principles that have been lost over time. When modern people look at these stones and cannot explain how they were made, it is not because ancient builders lacked intelligence. It is because we have forgotten something they once knew. The site does not need aliens or magic to be extraordinary. Its true power lies in the possibility that humans, using only natural materials and their own creativity, accomplish something that still seems impossible today. The next time someone claims that ancient people lacked advanced technology, it is worth remembering Puma Punku. Here, the stones are not just silent blocks. They are evidence of a knowledge system that may have allowed stone to flow like water, harden like metal, and resist the passage of time. Even today, the stones refuse to give up all their secrets. They continue to challenge scientists, inspire researchers, and capture the imagination of people around the world. Whether they were carved with unbelievable skill or cast using a forgotten formula, the builders of Tiwanaku left behind something that still amazes us. They shaped stone with purpose and precision, and in doing so, they shaped a legacy that will continue to spark curiosity for generations to come.